A husband took his wife and 2 kids to a remote island hut for a family vacation, then abandoned them there with no boat, no phone, no way to escape. But what his wife uncovered in that hut exposed him as a serial killer who'd murdered 8 women on that same island over 15 years. She had hours to escape with her children before he returned to kill them too. Comment what city you're watching from and subscribe. San Juan Islands, Washington, USA. The hut sat on a tiny island in the San Juan archipelago off the coast of Washington state. Barely 2 acres of rocky shore, dense pine forest, and this single weathered structure that looked like it hadn't been occupied in decades. That's where Marcus Sullivan brought his family on what he'd called an adventure weekend in late September. His wife Rachel was 36, their daughter Zoe was 11, and their son Ethan was 8. They'd loaded into Marcus's boat at Friday Harbor with camping gear, food supplies, and excitement about a family getaway. "This island is completely private," Marcus had told them during the 2-hour boat ride. "No tourists. No cell service. Just us and nature for 3 days." Rachel had been thrilled. They'd been struggling as a couple. Marcus had been distant, irritable, working long hours at his tech job in Seattle. She'd hoped this trip would reconnect them as a family. The hut was worse than she'd expected. It was maybe 300 square feet, with gaps in the wooden walls, a roof that looked questionable, broken windows covered with rotted plywood, and a door that hung askew. "Marcus, this is pretty rough," Rachel said, looking at the dilapidated structure. "Are you sure this is safe for the kids?" "It'll be fine. We have sleeping bags and supplies. It's just for a few nights." They spent the afternoon exploring the island, really just a large rock outcropping with trees. The kids found tide pools and sea stars. Rachel gathered driftwood. Marcus was quiet, checking his watch repeatedly. As the sun began to set, they returned to the hut. Marcus started unloading supplies from the boat onto the small rocky beach. "I need to go back to the mainland for something I forgot," Marcus said suddenly. Rachel looked at him, confused. "What? Now? It's almost dark. I'll be back tomorrow morning. There's something I need to get from the house. I forgot to pack it." "What could be so important that you need to leave right now?" "Just something. Trust me. You'll be fine here overnight. The kids will think it's an adventure." Rachel felt uneasy, but she didn't want to argue in front of the children. "Okay. But be back first thing tomorrow. Promise?" "I promise," Marcus said, not meeting her eyes. He finished unloading supplies, several bags of food, their camping gear, some blankets. Then he got back in the boat, started the engine, and began pulling away from the island. "Dad, wait." Zoe called out. "You forgot your jacket." But Marcus didn't turn back. He just waved once and continued toward the open water. Rachel watched the boat disappear into the dusk. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't identify what. "Come on," she told the kids, forcing brightness into her voice. "Let's get set up in the hut. This is going to be a real adventure." But as they explored the hut more carefully, Rachel's unease grew. The supplies Marcus had left were minimal: some canned food, bottled water for maybe 2 days, their sleeping bags. But he'd taken the camping stove. He'd taken the first aid kit. He'd taken the waterproof matches and the emergency flares. And when Rachel checked her backpack, she realized he'd taken something else: her phone. It had been charging in the boat. Marcus must have removed it. Rachel pulled out her own phone from her pocket. No signal. She'd known that would be the case. Marcus had told them repeatedly there was no cell service on these remote islands. But now, with the boat gone, with minimal supplies, with no way to communicate, Rachel felt the first real stirrings of panic. "Mom, this place is really creepy," Ethan said, looking around the hut. "It smells weird." It did smell strange, musty, damp, with an underlying odor Rachel couldn't quite identify. And it was getting dark quickly. Rachel found an old propane lantern in the corner of the hut. Miraculously, it still had some fuel and worked when she lit it. In the flickering light, the hut looked even worse. Water stains covered the walls. The floor was rotted in places. There was debris everywhere, old newspapers, broken furniture, rusted cans. "Let's make the best of this," Rachel said, trying to stay positive for the kids. "We'll clean up a section, set up our sleeping bags, and tell stories. Dad will be back in the morning." But as they started clearing debris from one corner to make sleeping space, Zoe found something that made Rachel's blood run cold. A wallet. Old, water-damaged, but still intact enough to open. Inside was an ID card, Jennifer Morrison, age 34, from Seattle. The photo showed a woman with dark hair and a bright smile. The ID was dated 15 years ago. "Mom, why is there a wallet here?" Zoe asked. "I don't know, honey. Someone must have left it here a long time ago." But Rachel's mind was racing. This wasn't just an abandoned vacation hut. This was something else. Something wrong. She continued clearing debris, now more urgently. And she found more items, women's clothing, moldy and deteriorating but clearly not that old. A hairbrush with long blonde hair still tangled in it. A broken watch. Jewelry, a necklace, earrings. And then, under a pile of rotted newspapers in the corner, Rachel found something that made her heart stop. Bones. Small bones, weathered and old, partially buried in the dirt floor. Rachel pulled the kids away immediately. "Outside. Now. We're sleeping outside tonight." "Mom, what's wrong?" Zoe asked, frightened by her mother's tone. "Nothing. The hut isn't safe. The floor is too rotted. We'll camp outside. It'll be warmer, anyway." But as they settled outside on the rocky beach, using their sleeping bags and the supplies Marcus had left, Rachel's mind wouldn't stop working. The bones. The personal items from multiple women. The location, remote, isolated, unreachable. And Marcus bringing them here. Leaving them here. Taking the boat, the communication devices, most of the supplies. Rachel held her children close as darkness fell completely, and she faced a terrible possibility. Her husband hadn't brought them on a family vacation. He'd brought them to a place where women had disappeared. And now he'd left them here with no way to escape. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She kept the kids close, one arm around each of them as they slept in their sleeping bags on the rocky beach. The propane lantern provided some light and a small measure of psychological comfort, though Rachel knew it wouldn't last long. Her mind spun through the evidence. The wallet from a woman who'd been here 15 years ago. The clothing from multiple women. The bones. Was this where Marcus brought women? Had he been doing this for years? Was that why he'd been so distant, so secretive? And now he'd brought his own family here. Why? Rachel thought about the past few months. Marcus had been different, cold, detached. Their marriage had been failing. But she'd attributed it to work stress, to the normal difficulties of long-term relationships. Had she missed signs of something darker? As dawn broke, Rachel made a decision. She needed to know what was in that hut. Needed to understand what she was dealing with. "Kids, I need you to stay right here on the beach," Rachel told Zoe and Ethan. "Don't go anywhere. Stay together. I need to check something in the hut." "Mom, I'm scared," Ethan said. "When is Dad coming back?" "Soon, baby. He'll be back soon." But Rachel didn't believe that anymore. She went into the hut, the morning light filtering through the gaps in the walls providing better visibility than the lantern had. Rachel systematically searched the space, careful not to disturb anything too much but desperate to understand. She found more personal items, a purse with an ID for someone named Amanda Chen. A driver's license for Sarah Hughes. Pieces of jewelry. Clothing. All from different women. All seemingly abandoned here over a span of years. And in the corner where she'd found the first bones, Rachel carefully moved more debris and found more remains. Not a complete skeleton, just scattered bones, partially buried, some clearly damaged by animals or time. Rachel's hands shook as she photographed everything with the camera she'd brought for the trip. At least Marcus hadn't taken that. Even without cell service, she could document what she was finding. Then Rachel noticed something else. In the back corner of the hut, behind a collapsed section of wall, there was a metal box partially buried in the floor. Rachel dug it out with her hands, breaking nails, ignoring the pain. The box was locked, but the metal was rusted. She found a rock and bashed at the lock until it broke. Inside the box were things that made Rachel's stomach turn. Photographs of women, not vacation photos, but images that looked like surveillance. Women who didn't know they were being photographed. Notes with names, dates, physical descriptions. And newspaper clippings, articles about missing women in the Pacific Northwest spanning over a decade. Rachel recognized some of the names: Jennifer Morrison, the wallet she'd found; Amanda Chen, Sarah Hughes. These were real missing persons cases. Unsolved disappearances. And there, at the bottom of the box, was a notebook. Marcus's handwriting. Rachel opened it with trembling hands. The entries were clinical, detailed, horrifying. Jennifer Morrison, July 2009, brought to island under pretense of romantic getaway. 3 days. Disposed of remains in water. No connection to trace. Amanda Chen, April 2011, met online. Told her about private island retreat. 5 days. More difficult than Jennifer. Remains buried on island. Sarah Hughes, September 2013. The list went on. 8 women. 8 disappearances. All on this island. All murdered by Marcus. Rachel's husband wasn't just a killer. He was a serial killer who'd been operating for over 15 years. And now he'd brought his family here. Rachel's mind struggled to process this. Why? Why bring Rachel and the kids to the place where he'd killed 8 women? The answer came to her with horrible clarity. Marcus was planning to kill them too. Maybe he was tired of maintaining the facade of normal family life. Maybe Rachel had started asking too many questions. Maybe he just wanted to start over without the burden of a wife and children. Whatever his reason, he'd brought them to his killing ground and left them here. Rachel ran out of the hut to her children. "We're leaving," she told them. "Right now. We're getting off this island." "How?" Zoe asked. "Dad took the boat." Rachel looked at the water surrounding the small island. The nearest land, another island that might be inhabited, was maybe 2 miles away. Too far to swim, especially with children. But there had to be something. Marcus wouldn't have brought 8 women here and killed them without planning for every contingency. There had to be a way he managed this place, maintained it, returned to it. Rachel searched the perimeter of the island systematically. And on the far side, hidden behind dense brush and rocks, she found it, a small kayak, pulled up on shore and camouflaged with branches. It was old, probably left by previous owners of the island, but it looked functional. "Get in," Rachel told her children. "We're paddling to the next island. Now." "But Mom, what about Dad?" Ethan asked. "Your father," Rachel said, choosing her words carefully, "isn't who we thought he was. And we need to get somewhere safe. Trust me." The kayak was designed for 2, maybe 3 people at most. Fitting all 3 of them was cramped, but Rachel made it work. She took the center position with the paddle while Zoe and Ethan squeezed in front and behind her. Rachel began paddling, her arms burning, her heart pounding. She'd never paddled a kayak for distance before. But she didn't have a choice. They had to get off this island before Marcus returned. Because Rachel now understood, Marcus hadn't planned to come back in the morning. He'd planned to return in a few days or a week, expecting to find his family dead from exposure, dehydration, or desperation. Then he'd dispose of their bodies like he'd disposed of the others. Rachel paddled harder, ignoring the pain, focusing only on getting her children to safety. Behind them, the island where Marcus Sullivan had killed 8 women over 15 years receded into the distance. Ahead, another island slowly grew closer. Rachel didn't know what they'd find there. But anywhere was better than Marcus's killing ground. Rachel's arms felt like they were on fire. She'd been paddling for what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes. The kayak was barely moving, overloaded with 3 people and fighting against the current. "Mom, I'm cold," Ethan whimpered. Spray from the water had soaked them all. "I know, baby. We're almost there." But they weren't almost there. The island Rachel had been aiming for, what looked like maybe 2 miles, was proving much farther in reality. The distances in open water were deceptive, and the currents were working against them. Rachel's shoulders screamed in protest. Her hands were blistered. But she kept paddling. "Mom, look." Zoe pointed to the left. "Is that a boat?" Rachel looked. There was indeed a boat, a fishing vessel, maybe half a mile away, moving parallel to their course. Rachel waved frantically with one arm while trying to maintain balance. "Help! Help US!" But they were too far away. The boat continued on its course, the occupants never seeing the tiny kayak with 3 desperate people. "Keep waving," Rachel told Zoe. "Both of you. Make yourself as visible as possible." Zoe and Ethan waved their arms frantically. And maybe it was luck, or maybe the boat's crew saw the unusual sight of a struggling kayak, but the fishing vessel changed course and began heading toward them. Rachel sobbed with relief as the boat approached. It was a commercial fishing vessel, probably salmon fishing based on the equipment Rachel could see. 2 men appeared at the rail, grizzled, weathered, looking confused about why a woman and 2 children were in a kayak in the middle of the San Juan shipping lanes. "You folks need help," one of them called out. "Yes, please. We need to get to shore. We need to call the police. It's an emergency." The men exchanged glances, then nodded. They brought the boat alongside carefully and helped pull Rachel, Zoe, and Ethan aboard. "I'm Captain Tom Reynolds," the older man said. "This is my deckhand, Pete. What's going on? Where did you come from?" Rachel's words tumbled out. "My husband brought us to an island. He left us there. I found evidence of murders. Multiple women. Bodies. He's a serial killer. We need to call the police right now." Captain Reynolds's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Whoa, slow down. Your husband is a what?" "A serial killer. Marcus Sullivan. He's been killing women on that island for 15 years. I found remains. Evidence. Documentation. And he left us there to die." "Pete, get on the radio," Captain Reynolds ordered. "Contact the Coast Guard. Tell them we have an emergency situation." While Pete radioed for help, Captain Reynolds brought Rachel and the kids into the small cabin and wrapped them in blankets. He gave them hot coffee, watered down with milk for the kids, and energy bars. "Tell me everything," he said. Rachel did. She told him about the vacation Marcus had planned, about finding the wallet and personal items, about the bones, about the metal box with documentation of 8 murders spanning 15 years. Captain Reynolds's face grew darker as she spoke. "Jesus Christ. And you think he's planning to come back and kill you too? I don't know what else explains it. He stranded us there with minimal supplies. No communication. No boat. I found evidence he's been killing women there for over a decade. Why else would he bring his family there?" "Maybe he's running," Pete suggested, coming back from the radio. "Maybe he thinks you found out and he's making you disappear so there's no witnesses." "Coast Guard is dispatching a cutter," Pete reported. "They want our coordinates and the location of the island where you were." Rachel described it as best she could. The fishing boat had GPS, so they were able to pinpoint their current location. Rachel estimated the island was maybe 3 miles northeast. "I took photos," Rachel remembered suddenly. "On my camera. Of everything I found." She pulled out her waterproof camera case. The camera was still functional, the memory card intact. Captain Reynolds looked through the photos, the wallet, the bones, the items from multiple women, the metal box contents, the pages from Marcus's journal. This is evidence of multiple homicides," he said. "We need to preserve this. Don't delete anything. Don't let anyone touch it except law enforcement." A Coast Guard cutter arrived within 30 minutes, Fast response because of the nature of the emergency. Rachel, Zoe, and Ethan were transferred to the cutter, along with Captain Reynolds, who agreed to serve as a witness. On the Coast Guard vessel, Rachel gave her statement to the officers while a medic checked the children for injuries and hypothermia. "Ma'am, we're going to need to secure that island as a crime scene," the lead officer said. "And we need to locate your husband immediately. Do you know where he might be?" "He said he was going back to the mainland. We live in Seattle, Ballard neighborhood. But I don't know if he actually went home or if he's somewhere else. We'll coordinate with Seattle PD and FBI. This is a federal matter now. Multiple homicides across state waters. Can you provide us with your husband's information?" Rachel gave them everything: Marcus's full name, address, phone number, workplace, vehicle description, even his social security number, which she happened to know. "Does your husband own the island where you were?" an officer asked. "I don't know. I didn't even know it existed until yesterday. He said it was private, but I don't know if he owns it or just knew about it." The Coast Guard took Rachel and the children to Friday Harbor, while a team was dispatched to the island to secure the crime scene. At Friday Harbor, FBI agents were already waiting. Rachel was separated from the children, who were taken to be cared for by a victim advocate while being kept safe, and interviewed intensively. She told her story multiple times, to multiple agents. She showed them the photos. She described everything she'd found in the hut: the bones, the personal items, the metal box, the journal. "Mrs. Sullivan, how long have you been married to Marcus?" Agent David Chin asked. 12 years. We met in college. Got married right after graduation. Had Zoe a few years later, then Ethan. In 12 years, did you ever suspect your husband of anything like this? Rachel thought carefully. No. He was normal. A good father, or so I thought. He worked in tech, software development. He traveled sometimes for work. He had hobbies, sailing, hiking. But I never. There were no signs. Or if there were, I missed them completely. The women in his journal, the murders span from 2009 to at least 2020. You were already married by then. He was committing these murders while married to you and raising your children. The reality of that hit Rachel like a physical blow. She'd been married to a serial killer for over a decade. Had shared a bed with him. Had raised children with him. And she'd never known. How is that possible? Rachel asked, her voice breaking. How did I not see it? Serial killers are often very good at compartmentalizing, Agent Chen said gently. They maintain normal lives, normal relationships. The monster and the man are separate. You're not at fault for not seeing it. But Rachel felt the crushing weight of guilt anyway. 8 women had died. She'd been sleeping next to their killer and hadn't known. We've located your husband, another agent said, entering the interview room. Seattle PD found him at your home. He's been taken into custody. Rachel felt a wave of relief so intense she nearly passed out. Marcus was in custody. He couldn't hurt anyone else. What did he say? Rachel asked. Did he admit anything? He claims innocence. Says you're mentally ill, that you're making up stories, that he went back to the mainland to get supplies and was planning to return today. He's denying everything. I have photos. Physical evidence. His journal in his handwriting. We know. The evidence is strong. But he's going to fight this. You need to be prepared for that. Over the following days, the investigation unfolded rapidly. A forensic team scoured the island. They found exactly what Rachel had found and more: multiple sets of human remains buried in shallow graves around the island, personal items from at least 8 different women, and extensive documentation of Marcus's crimes. They also found something Rachel hadn't discovered: a second hut, deeper in the island's small forest, that Marcus had been using as a supply cache. Inside were tools, restraints, and other items that told the story of premeditation and planning. This wasn't impulsive killing, Agent Chen told Rachel during a follow-up interview. Your husband was methodical. He selected victims carefully, women he met online, women traveling alone, women who wouldn't immediately be missed. He brought them to the island under false pretenses. And he killed them there where there were no witnesses. What about the bodies? Did he just leave them on the island? Some he buried on the island. Some he weighted down and dumped in the deeper water. The currents in the San Juan channels are strong. Bodies could drift for miles or be consumed by marine life. That's probably why these disappearances were never connected. Rachel thought about the 8 women, Jennifer Morrison, Amanda Chen, Sarah Hughes, and 5 others whose names she'd seen in Marcus's journal. All of them just gone. Families who'd never known what happened. At least now their families will have answers, Rachel said. That's something. It is. Because of you. If you hadn't found that evidence, if you hadn't gotten yourself and your kids off that island, Marcus might have continued. You saved future potential victims. But I didn't save the 8 who already died. You couldn't have known. No one could have. The media coverage was intense. Seattle man arrested as serial killer, island of horrors discovered, screamed the headlines. Marcus's photo was everywhere. The handsome, normal-looking software developer who'd hidden a monstrous secret for over 15 years. Rachel and the children were kept in protective custody while the investigation continued. Reporters tried desperately to get interviews. Rachel refused all of them. She was focused on 2 things: protecting her children from the trauma of learning their father was a serial killer, and trying to process her own trauma of having been married to him for 12 years without knowing. Zoe and Ethan knew their father had done bad things and was in jail, but Rachel hadn't told them the full scope. They were too young. She'd tell them when they were older, with the help of therapists. For now, she just held them and told them they were safe. The forensic investigation of the island took weeks. Rachel was asked to return to the island with investigators to show them exactly where she'd found everything. It was one of the hardest things she'd ever done, returning to the place where Marcus had planned for her and her children to die. The island looked different in daylight, surrounded by law enforcement. What had been isolated and terrifying was now a bustling crime scene with forensic tents, evidence markers, and dozens of investigators. This is where I found the first wallet, Rachel said, pointing to the corner of the hut. Jennifer Morrison's ID was inside. The forensic team carefully documented everything. They'd already found and removed the human remains Rachel had discovered, but they were still processing the site for any additional evidence. Mrs. Sullivan, you mentioned a metal box with journals and documentation, Agent Chen said. Can you show us exactly where that was? Rachel led him to the back corner where she'd dug out the box. The investigators had already removed it, but they wanted Rachel to confirm the location and describe exactly how she'd found it. It was buried about 6 inches down, behind that collapsed wall section. The lock was rusted. I broke it open with a rock. That box is the key to our case, Agent Chen said. Your husband documented everything: dates, victim names, methods. It's rare for serial killers to keep such detailed records, but when they do, it makes prosecution much easier. Why would he document it? Rachel asked. Why create evidence against himself? Ego. Control. Reliving the crimes. Serial killers often keep trophies or records. It's part of their psychology. They want to remember, to savor what they've done. Rachel felt sick. While she'd been at home raising their children, Marcus had been on this island, documenting his murders, keeping souvenirs from the women he'd killed. Did you find anything about why he brought us here? Rachel asked. Why he was planning to kill his own family. We found recent entries in his journal. From the past few months. Would you like to know what they say? Rachel wasn't sure she did. But she nodded. Agent Chen pulled out his phone and read from photos of the journal entries. Rachel is asking too many questions. Noticed the boat trips. Noticed the inconsistencies in my timeline. She's becoming a liability. Solution: family tragedy. Boat accident or exposure on the island. Investigated as unfortunate accident. Clean slate. Can start over without complications. Rachel's hands were shaking. He was planning this for months. Yes. The entries show premeditation. He'd been working out the logistics, how to make it look like an accident, how to cover his tracks, how to appear as the grieving husband and father who'd tragically lost his family. But why bring us to the same island where he killed the others? Wasn't that risky? We believe he intended to claim your bodies were never found, lost to the ocean, presumed drowned. He'd set up the hut to look like you'd been camping there when tragedy struck. No one would have reason to search the island thoroughly. His previous victims would have remained undiscovered. But I found them anyway. You did. And by escaping, you forced him to leave evidence behind that he couldn't clean up. If you'd died as he planned, he would have had time to remove or hide anything incriminating before reporting you missing. Rachel thought about this. So his plan was to kill us, stage it as an accident, and then continue living his life as if nothing happened? Essentially, yes. He'd been doing exactly that for 15 years, killing periodically, then returning to his normal life as a husband, father, and software developer. You were just going to be his next victims. Except we got away. Except you got away. You saved yourself and your children through observation, quick thinking, and courage. That's remarkable. Rachel didn't feel remarkable. She felt traumatized, betrayed, and deeply guilty that she hadn't somehow known what Marcus was. The identification of Marcus's victims moved forward. The remains found on the island were examined by forensic anthropologists. Dental records and DNA were used to confirm identities where possible. Jennifer Morrison, whose wallet Rachel had found, was positively identified from remains found buried on the island's western side. She'd been reported missing in July 2009 after telling friends she was going on a weekend getaway with a man she'd met online. She'd never returned. Amanda Chen was identified from remains found in a shallow grave near the treeline. Missing since April 2011, last seen leaving a coffee shop in Seattle after mentioning she had a date. Sarah Hughes, missing since September 2013, was identified from remains found near the hut. 5 other women were identified from various remains found across the island: Melissa Torres, Christina Valdez, Nicole Henderson, Brittany Shaw, and Tanya Williams. All missing between 2015 and 2020. All unsolved cases. All now solved by the evidence Rachel had uncovered. 8 families finally had answers after years of not knowing. Rachel was contacted by several of the victims' families. Some wanted to thank her. Others just wanted to talk to someone who understood what their loved one's final hours might have been like. Jennifer Morrison's mother, Patricia, called Rachel. "I don't blame you," Patricia said through tears. "I know some people might think you should have known, should have seen signs. But I don't think that. You're a victim too. And you gave us answers we've needed for 15 years. Thank you. I'm so sorry about your daughter," Rachel said. "I'm sorry I didn't figure out what Marcus was sooner." How could you have? Monsters hide in plain sight. That's what makes them monsters. But not everyone was as forgiving. Brittany Shaw's sister gave an interview to a national news outlet. How could she not know? How could she be married to this man, sleep next to him, and not realize he was a serial killer? She must have suspected something. Rachel watched the interview feeling like she'd been punched in the stomach. The guilt she already felt intensified. Should she have known? Were there signs she missed? She thought back over 12 years of marriage. Had there been red flags? Marcus had traveled for work. Was that when he was actually hunting victims? He'd had a boat and would go sailing alone. Was he visiting the island to relive his crimes? He'd been secretive about his phone and computer. Was he communicating with potential victims online? Looking back with the knowledge she now had, Rachel could see patterns. But in the moment, living it, she'd attributed those things to normal behavior: work travel, hobby time, reasonable privacy. "You can't second-guess yourself," her therapist told her during one of their sessions. "Serial killers are master manipulators. They maintain normal facades specifically to avoid detection. The fact that you didn't suspect him doesn't make you complicit, it makes him good at hiding what he was. But 8 women died while I was married to him. 8 women died because Marcus Sullivan is a murderer. Not because you failed to detect what he was hiding. The guilt belongs to him alone. Rationally, Rachel understood this. Emotionally, she struggled with it every day. As the trial date approached, Rachel learned more details about Marcus's crimes that made them even more horrifying. The FBI's analysis of Marcus's computer revealed he'd been active on multiple dating sites under fake names. He'd had entire false personas, fake photos, fake jobs, fake lives, that he used to attract women. He'd been methodical in his victim selection. Women who were single, who didn't have close family ties, who were new to the area or traveling alone. Women who wouldn't immediately be missed or whose disappearances could be attributed to running away or starting a new life. He was organized and intelligent, Agent Chen told Rachel. He researched each victim extensively before approaching them. He knew their routines, their vulnerabilities, their social networks. By the time he made contact, he knew exactly how to manipulate them. Was I selected the same way? Did he target me? Agent Chen hesitated. We don't think so. The evidence suggests you were a genuine relationship. He met you in college before his killing started. You served a different purpose. Cover. Being married with children made him look normal, trustworthy. It's called a mask of sanity. You and your children were props in his performance of normalcy. Rachel felt dehumanized by that assessment. She and her children had been props. Tools Marcus used to hide what he really was. What about the kids? Rachel asked. Did he ever care about them at all? We can't know what he felt, Agent Chen said carefully. But his willingness to kill them suggests that whatever attachment he had was secondary to his own needs and desires. When they became inconvenient, when you became a perceived threat, he was willing to eliminate all of you. Rachel thought about Zoe and Ethan. They'd adored their father. He'd played with them, taught them to sail, attended their school events. Had any of that been real? Or had it all been performance? The children are asking about their father, Rachel told Agent Chen. They want to know when they can see him. They don't understand yet what he did. How do I tell them? With professional help. Child psychologists who specialize in trauma. But eventually, they'll need to know the truth. Not all the details, they're too young for that. But they need to understand that their father hurt people and that's why he's in jail. They're going to be in therapy for years. Probably. But they have you. You're stable, loving, protective. That matters more than anything. Marcus's trial began with intense media coverage. He'd entered a not guilty plea despite overwhelming evidence. His defense strategy was to claim that Rachel had manufactured the evidence, that she'd planted the items in the hut, that she was mentally unstable and had created an elaborate fiction to escape the marriage. She's trying to frame me, Marcus told the court during his testimony. I brought my family to that island for a vacation. I left briefly to get supplies. When I returned the next day, they were gone. Then I'm arrested and accused of being a serial killer based entirely on her claims. What about the journal in your handwriting? The prosecutor asked. I never kept a journal. That's fabricated. Or if it exists, Rachel wrote it to frame me. What about the human remains found on the island? The personal items from 8 missing women? I don't know anything about that. The island isn't even mine. It's public land. Anyone could have left those things there. His testimony was calm, reasonable, believable if you didn't know the evidence. But the prosecution had that evidence. They had the DNA evidence linking Marcus to several of the victims. They had his computer history showing contact with all 8 women before their disappearances. They had his journal with details only the killer could know. They had the timeline of his boat trips correlating with when victims vanished. And they had Rachel's testimony. Rachel took the stand and told her story, The vacation that wasn't a vacation, the discoveries in the hut, the escape with her children, the documentation she'd found. Marcus's defense attorney tried to paint her as unstable, as vindictive, as a woman scorned, creating an elaborate revenge fantasy. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Sullivan, that you and your husband were having marital problems?" "Yes." "Isn't it true that you'd threatened to leave him and take the children?" "No, that's not true." "Isn't it possible that you created this entire story to ensure you'd get custody of the children and paint yourself as the victim?" Rachel looked directly at the defense attorney. "I wish I had created this. I wish this was all a nightmare I made up. But 8 women are dead. Their remains were found on that island. My husband documented killing them. Nothing I say or do changes those facts." The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all counts, 8 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, Rachel, Zoe, and Ethan, kidnapping, and multiple other charges. Marcus showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Rachel, sitting in the gallery with the families of Marcus's victims, felt a complex mix of relief, sadness, and continued disbelief that this was her life now. At sentencing, the judge gave Marcus 8 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. "You are a predator who hid behind a mask of normalcy," the judge said. "You betrayed your family, your victims, and society. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, and that is exactly what you deserve." Marcus was led away in shackles. He didn't look at Rachel or the children. Didn't acknowledge anyone. Just disappeared into the custody of corrections officers. Rachel would never have to see him again unless she chose to. She chose not to. In the aftermath of the trial, Rachel faced the enormous task of rebuilding her life and helping her children heal from trauma they were only beginning to understand. They'd moved from Seattle to a small town in Oregon, far from the media attention, far from the reminders of Marcus, far from the life they'd lived before. Rachel changed their last name legally from Sullivan to her maiden name, Parker. She wanted nothing connecting her children to Marcus. Zoe and Ethan were in intensive therapy. They'd been told age-appropriate truths, that their father had hurt people and was in prison, that he'd made very bad choices, that none of it was their fault. "Do you think Daddy loved us?" Ethan asked Rachel one night during their bedtime routine. Rachel chose her words carefully. "I think he loved you as much as he was capable of loving anyone. But your father had something broken inside him that made him do terrible things. That brokenness was about him, not about you." "I miss him sometimes," Ethan admitted quietly. "Is that bad?" "No, baby. It's not bad. He was your father for 8 years. You have memories of him being loving and fun. Those memories are real, even if we now know other things about him. It's okay to miss the father you thought you had. But he's a bad person. He did very bad things. And he's being punished for them. But it's okay for you to have complicated feelings about that." These conversations were painful and necessary. Rachel was grateful for the child psychologist, Dr. Susan Chen, who guided them through the process. "The children are remarkably resilient," Dr. Chen told Rachel. "They have nightmares and anxiety, which is normal. But they also have a stable, loving mother who's committed to their healing. That matters enormously." Rachel was in her own therapy, processing her trauma. The betrayal of discovering her husband was a serial killer, the guilt she felt about not knowing, the terror of escaping the island, the ongoing stress of the trial and media attention. "I keep thinking about all the moments I should have known," Rachel told her therapist. "The time he came home late smelling like smoke and said he'd been at a bonfire. The scratches on his arms he said were from hiking. The mood swings. How did I miss all of it? Because you were looking at your husband, not at a serial killer. We don't examine the people we love for signs they're monsters. We trust them. That's what relationships are built on." He exploited that trust. 8 women died. Because Marcus Sullivan killed them. Not because you failed to be psychic. Rachel intellectually understood this. But emotionally, the guilt persisted. She found some peace in connecting with the victims' families. Not all of them wanted contact, but several did. Jennifer Morrison's mother, Patricia, became particularly close to Rachel. They'd meet for coffee and talk about their respective trauma: Patricia's loss of her daughter, Rachel's betrayal by her husband. "I spent 15 years not knowing," Patricia said. "Wondering if Jennifer was alive somewhere, if she'd chosen to disappear, if I'd somehow failed her as a mother. At least now I know. I can grieve properly. And that's because of you. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just didn't want to die on that island. You documented everything. You photographed the evidence. You got yourself and your children to safety. That took extraordinary presence of mind under terrifying circumstances." Rachel hadn't thought about it that way. In her mind, she'd just been surviving. But others saw her actions differently: as heroic, as brave, as worthy of admiration. A victims' advocacy organization reached out to Rachel and asked if she'd be willing to speak about her experience. "We work with women in abusive relationships, women who feel trapped, women who don't realize they're in danger," the organization's director explained. "Your story, about not knowing the danger you were in until it was almost too late, could help other women recognize warning signs." Rachel was hesitant. She didn't want to be the face of woman who was married to a serial killer. But she also felt a responsibility to do something meaningful with her experience. She agreed to speak at a conference for victim advocates and counselors. Standing before 200 people, Rachel told her story. She described the seemingly normal marriage, the gradual realization something was wrong, the horror of discovery, the escape. "I missed the signs," Rachel told the audience. "Or maybe there were no signs to miss. Serial killers are exceptionally good at hiding what they are. But what I want you to take away from my experience is this: if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. If your partner is secretive, controlling, or their explanations don't quite add up, trust your instincts." I didn't trust mine. I explained away inconsistencies. I gave Marcus the benefit of the doubt. And while that didn't make me responsible for what he did, it did keep me from protecting myself and my children sooner. Women are socialized to be trusting, to see the best in people, to make relationships work. Sometimes that gets us killed. So trust your gut. And if you feel unsafe, get out. Ask for help. Don't wait until you're abandoned on an island with a serial killer's evidence to realize you're in danger. The speech was powerful. Several audience members approached Rachel afterward to thank her and share their own stories of escaping dangerous relationships. One woman, Michelle, said, "My boyfriend had similar patterns to your husband: secretive, traveling unexpectedly, inconsistent stories. I kept making excuses for him. But hearing your story made me realize I needed to pay attention to my gut feeling. I ended the relationship. Found out later he had warrants for assault in another state. You probably saved my life." Rachel realized she could turn her trauma into something meaningful. She could help other women avoid similar fates. Rachel began working with the Victims Advocacy Organization as a volunteer speaker and consultant. She developed a program specifically for women in relationships where they felt something was off, but couldn't quite identify what. "We're taught to be rational, to have concrete evidence before acting," Rachel would tell groups. "But intuition is pattern recognition. Your subconscious brain is processing information your conscious brain hasn't organized yet. If something feels wrong, there's probably a reason, even if you can't articulate it." Rachel also worked with law enforcement agencies, helping them understand the family dynamics of serial killers from an insider perspective. "They're not all loners living in basements," Rachel explained to a group of detectives. "Many serial killers are married with children. They maintain normal facades. That's what makes them hard to catch. You need to look beyond the surface presentation." The work was therapeutic for Rachel. It gave her purpose. It transformed her from victim to advocate. Zoe, now 13, knew more of the truth about her father now. She struggled with it: anger, shame, confusion about her own identity. Am I going to be like him? Zoe asked Rachel one evening. Is there something evil in me because he's my father? No, baby. Absolutely not. What your father did came from choices he made, not from genetics. You are kind, empathetic, compassionate. You're nothing like him. But his DNA is in me. DNA doesn't determine character. You're shaped by how you're raised, by the values you choose, by the person you decide to be. And you're choosing to be a good person. That's what matters. Ethan, now 10, had different struggles. He barely remembered his father now. The memories were fading, replaced by knowledge of what Marcus had done. I'm glad I don't remember him much, Ethan told Rachel. It's easier not having good memories to feel confused about. Rachel wasn't sure if that was actually better or worse, but she accepted that each child processed trauma differently. 3 years after the island incident, Rachel was approached by a documentary filmmaker. I want to tell the full story, the filmmaker, Kate Morrison, explained. Not just the crimes, but the family impact. How you rebuilt your life. How the victims' families found closure. The systemic issues that allowed Marcus to operate undetected for so long. Rachel was hesitant about participating. But Kate had a compelling argument. Your story can help people understand how serial killers hide in plain sight. It can help families of victims know they're not alone. And it can help other women trust their instincts. That's powerful. Rachel agreed, with conditions. Her children's faces would be obscured, their voices altered. They'd be involved only minimally. And victim families would have final say on how their loved ones were portrayed. The resulting documentary, Island of Secrets, The Marcus Sullivan Case, was released and became a cultural phenomenon. It told the complete story. Marcus's crimes, Rachel's discovery and escape, the investigation, the trial, and the aftermath. It featured interviews with Rachel, several victims' families, law enforcement, forensic psychologists, and experts on serial killers. The documentary sparked broader conversations about how serial killers maintain normal facades and families, why intimate partners often don't recognize danger signs, the importance of trusting intuition in relationships, how to better detect and prevent serial violence. Rachel received thousands of messages after the documentary aired. Many were supportive. Some were critical. People who thought she must have known, should have suspected, were somehow complicit. You can't please everyone, Kate told her. Some people will always blame the wife. But look at the impact. Women are leaving dangerous relationships, citing your story as the catalyst. Law enforcement is changing how they investigate disappearances. That matters more than what internet trolls think. 5 years after escaping the island, Rachel had become a nationally recognized advocate for victims' rights and domestic violence awareness. The work had started small, speaking at local events, consulting with victim services organizations. But it had grown into something larger. Rachel founded Trust Your Instincts, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping women recognize danger in relationships before it escalated to crisis. The organization offered multiple services. Educational programs teaching women to identify red flags and manipulation tactic, support groups for women married to or dating men with concerning behaviors, safety planning, resources for women preparing to leave dangerous relationships, advocacy for better investigation of missing persons cases, training for law enforcement on recognizing serial predators hiding in plain sight. What Marcus did to 8 women, and attempted to do to me and our children, shouldn't have been possible, Rachel told donors at a fundraising event. But it was possible because we as a society don't talk about how predators hide among us. We assume serial killers are obvious monsters. They're not. They're neighbors, co-workers, husbands. And we need to get better at recognizing them. The organization attracted significant funding from foundations focused on women's safety and victims' rights. Within 3 years, Trust Your Instincts was operating in 15 states with a budget of several $1 million. Rachel hired staff who'd also survived dangerous relationships, women who understood from personal experience what it meant to dismiss red flags, to rationalize concerning behavior, to realize too late that they were in danger. One staff member, Jennifer, named after Jennifer Morrison, Marcus's first victim, had escaped an abusive marriage where her husband had threatened to kill her multiple times. "I stayed because I kept thinking he'd change," Jennifer told a group during one of their workshops. "I made excuses for his behavior. I believed his apologies." Sound familiar? Women in the audience nodded. Many were in similar situations, not married to serial killers necessarily, but to controlling partners, abusive partners, partners whose behavior felt wrong but not wrong enough to leave. "The difference between my husband and Rachel's husband is degree, not kind," Jennifer continued. "Both were manipulative. Both were secretive. Both made us doubt our own perceptions. Rachel's husband escalated to murder. Mine escalated to violence. The patterns are the same. And that's why learning to recognize those patterns early is so critical." Rachel also worked extensively with law enforcement. She consulted on missing persons cases, helping detectives understand family dynamics and relationship patterns that might indicate danger. "When a woman goes missing, the intimate partner should always be the first investigated," Rachel told a room full of detectives at a training session. "Not because all men are violent, but because statistically, women are most at risk from the men closest to them." Marcus Sullivan was hiding in plain sight for 15 years. His wife didn't suspect him. His colleagues didn't suspect him. Because he looked normal. But if investigators had looked more closely at the missing women he'd been in contact with, patterns would have emerged. Multiple women disappeared after meeting a man who used online dating. That should have triggered investigation. We need to connect the dots faster. Before the body count reaches 8. Rachel's work caught the attention of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. They invited her to Quantico to speak to agents about recognizing serial predators in domestic contexts. "You lived with a serial killer for 12 years without knowing," the unit chief said. "That gives you unique insight. Help us understand, what were the patterns you can see now, looking back?" Rachel thought carefully. Compartmentalization. Marcus had completely separate lives that never touched. His family life, his work life, and his killing life were in different boxes. He was methodical about keeping them separate. Secretiveness that seemed normal. "He had a boat, which I thought was just a hobby. He traveled for work, which seemed legitimate. He was private about his computer and phone, which I rationalized as respecting his personal space. Looking back, all of those things were mechanisms to hide his crimes. And most importantly, emotional flatness. He could be charming and engaged when needed, but there was a fundamental lack of deep emotional connection. I attributed that to personality or the stress of daily life. But in retrospect, it was because he lacked normal empathy. He could mimic emotions but not truly feel them." The agents took notes. Rachel's perspective was valuable precisely because she'd lived the experience without knowing what it was. "The scary thing," Rachel concluded, "is that if Marcus had decided not to kill me and the kids, if he'd just continued his double life, I probably still wouldn't know. I'd still be married to him, raising our children, completely unaware. That's how good he was at hiding." That sobering reality informed Rachel's advocacy work. She emphasized that it wasn't victims' responsibility to detect predators, it was society's responsibility to create better systems for catching them. Zoe was 16 now, navigating high school while carrying the burden of being the serial killer's daughter. She'd legally changed her name to Zoe Parker, but her connection to Marcus Sullivan was something classmates discovered and exploited. "Is it true your dad killed 8 women?" students would ask, part curiosity, part cruelty. Zoe learned to deflect. "My biological father committed crimes and is in prison. My mom and I are separate people." But it was hard. Zoe struggled with identity questions that most teenagers didn't face. Was she destined to be like Marcus? Could she trust her own emotions and relationships when she'd grown up loving a monster? "I'm afraid I'll choose someone like him," Zoe confessed to Rachel. "What if I'm attracted to the same qualities he had? What if I don't see red flags because I was trained from birth to normalize them?" "That's why you're in therapy," Rachel said gently. "Why you're learning about healthy relationships. Why you're conscious of these concerns. That awareness is your protection. But what if it's not enough? Then you trust your support system. You trust your friends. You trust me. You don't have to navigate relationships alone. We'll help you see things clearly. Zoe also channeled her experience into advocacy. She started speaking at high schools about growing up with a hidden family secret, about how trauma affects young people, about breaking cycles. I didn't choose my biological father, Zoe would tell audiences of teenagers. But I choose who I become. I choose to be kind, honest, and aware. I choose to use my experience to help others. That's how you overcome a terrible legacy, by building a better one. Her talks resonated with young people dealing with family trauma, abuse, or violence. Zoe received countless messages from teenagers saying she'd helped them feel less alone. Ethan, now 13, took a different path. He was interested in forensic science and criminal psychology, wanting to understand what had made Marcus tick. Is it weird that I want to study serial killers? Ethan asked Rachel. Given that my dad was one? Not weird. Natural. You're trying to understand something that affected you deeply. That's healthy curiosity, not concerning. Ethan devoured books on criminal psychology, watched documentaries, and talked about becoming an FBI profiler someday. I want to catch people like my dad, Ethan explained. I want to stop them before they hurt people. Maybe having insight into how their minds work, because of who my dad was, gives me an advantage. Rachel supported this. Ethan was processing his trauma through intellectual understanding. As long as it remained healthy curiosity rather than obsession, it was a valid path. 8 years after the island incident, Rachel received an unexpected letter. It was from Marcus, writing from prison. Rachel debated whether to read it. She'd successfully rebuilt her life without him. Did she really want to let him back in, even through written words? Curiosity won. She opened the letter. Rachel, I know you have no reason to read this or believe anything I say. But I've been in prison for 8 years now, with a lot of time to think. I'm not going to claim I've found religion or been reformed. I'm not going to apologize, because apologies are meaningless for what I did. 8 women are dead because of me. I tried to kill you and our children. There's no apology adequate for that. But I want you to know some things. I never loved anyone. Not you, not the kids, not the women I killed. I'm not capable of love in the way normal people are. I mimic it, I perform it, but I don't feel it. That's not your fault or a reflection on you. It's a fundamental emptiness in me. You asked yourself if you should have known. The answer is no. I was very good at hiding what I was. You couldn't have known because I made sure you couldn't. The kids, tell them they're nothing like me. Whatever genetic contribution I made is irrelevant. They're being raised by you, shaped by your values. They'll be fine. And you were never the problem. Never inadequate. Never guilty of anything except trusting someone who didn't deserve trust. You survived. You protected our children. You've built something meaningful from the worst thing I did. That's more than I ever contributed to the world. I won't contact you again. This isn't me seeking forgiveness or connection. This is me acknowledging the truth. You won. I tried to destroy you and instead you became someone who helps people. I'm locked in a cage and you're free. That's exactly how it should be. Marcus. Rachel read the letter twice, then set it aside. She felt nothing. Not satisfaction at his acknowledgement. Not anger at his intrusion. Not sadness at what their marriage had been. Just nothing. Marcus had become irrelevant to her life. A biological fact, father of her children, but not a person who mattered anymore. Rachel filed the letter away without responding. She had more important things to focus on: her children, her work, the hundreds of women trust your instincts was helping, the families of victims finding closure. Marcus's letter was just words from a man whose opinion no longer affected her. 10 years after the island incident, Trust Your Instincts held its anniversary gala. Over 500 people attended: survivors, advocates, donors, law enforcement partners, and supporters. The organization had grown beyond anything Rachel had imagined. They'd helped over 5,000 women recognize and escape dangerous relationships. They'd trained over 10,000 law enforcement officers. They'd influenced policy in multiple states regarding missing persons investigations and domestic violence response. Rachel took the stage to address the crowd. 10 years ago, my husband tried to kill me and our children by abandoning us on a remote island. He'd already killed 8 women there. I thought my life was over. Instead, I found evidence of his crimes. I saved my children. And I discovered I had a choice: let that experience destroy me, or transform it into something meaningful. I chose transformation. I chose to help other women trust their instincts, recognize danger, and escape before it's too late. And I wasn't alone in that choice. Everyone in this room chose the same thing: to turn trauma into purpose. To make sure others don't suffer what we suffered. In 10 years, we've built something extraordinary. Not just an organization, but a community. A movement. Proof that our worst experiences don't have to define us, they can become the foundation for our most important work. Marcus Sullivan tried to erase me and my children. Instead, he accidentally created the catalyst for a movement that saved thousands of lives. That's not his victory. It's ours. We took his cruelty and transformed it into compassion. That's the greatest revenge possible. The crowd stood and applauded for 5 minutes straight. After the gala, Rachel stood outside looking at the stars, so different from that terrifying night on the island 10 years ago when she'd huddled with her children, not knowing if they'd survive. They'd survived. They'd thrived. They'd built something lasting from horror. Zoe and Ethan joined her outside. "Mom, I'm proud of you," Zoe said. "For everything you've built. Everything you've become." "I'm proud of all of us," Rachel replied. "We survived together. We healed together. We built this together. Do you think about the island much anymore?" Ethan asked. "Sometimes. But when I do, I don't think about the fear. I think about the moment I decided we were going to escape. The moment I chose survival over giving up. That's what I want to remember. Not the horror, but the choice." "That's what makes you strong, Mom," Zoe said. "You always choose to fight." Rachel hugged both her children. They were almost adults now, strong, compassionate, purposeful. They'd taken the worst thing that could have happened and refused to let it break them. That was the real victory. Not just survival but transformation. Not just escaping Marcus's island, but building an empire of hope from the evidence of his crimes. Marcus had tried to create a legacy of death. Rachel had created a legacy of life. And in the end, that was the only revenge that mattered. 15 years after the island incident, Rachel stood on a dock in Friday Harbor looking out at the San Juan Islands. She hadn't been back to this area since the trial. But today was different. Today was important. The island where Marcus had killed 8 women and tried to kill his family had been purchased by Trust Your Instincts with donor funding. After years of legal proceedings and environmental assessments, they'd transformed it into something Marcus never could have imagined: the Survivors Memorial and Education Center. The old hut where Rachel had found the evidence had been preserved exactly as it was, now a somber museum documenting what had happened there and honoring the 8 women whose lives had been taken. But surrounding it, the organization had built something beautiful: a retreat center where survivors of violence could come for healing, education, and connection. There were comfortable cabins for visitors, a central meeting hall for workshops and therapy sessions, a meditation garden, trails through the island's natural beauty, and memorial stones for each of Marcus's victims. Turning the place where he committed evil into a place of healing, that's powerful symbolism, the center's director told Rachel. This island was where he thought he could destroy with impunity. Now it's where survivors find strength. Rachel, now 51, was there for the official opening ceremony. So were the families of all 8 victims. And so were Zoe and Ethan, now young adults. Zoe was 26, working as a therapist specializing in trauma and family dynamics. She'd chosen her career specifically to help others navigate the kind of complex family trauma she'd experienced. Ethan was 23, in graduate school studying forensic psychology. He was working on research about familial connections to serial killers and how children of violent criminals process their identity. Both of them had transformed their connection to Marcus from shame to purpose. The ceremony began with tribal representatives from the Coast Salish people, who offered a blessing to cleanse the land of violence and welcome it into a new purpose. Then Rachel spoke. 15 years ago, I stood on this island thinking I was going to die. My husband had abandoned me and our children here, expecting us to perish so he could continue living his double life as a serial killer and a normal family man. But we didn't die. We escaped. And in escaping, we exposed his crimes. 8 families finally got answers about missing loved ones. A predator was stopped before he could claim more victims. For years, this island was known only as a place of horror, where Marcus Sullivan killed 8 women over 15 years. But today, we're reclaiming it. This island is no longer defined by his cruelty. It's now defined by resilience, healing, and hope. The Survivors Memorial and Education Center will serve hundreds of people each year, survivors of violence who need a place to heal, professionals learning to better serve victims, families seeking understanding and closure. Marcus tried to create a legacy of death on this island. We've created a legacy of life. That transformation, from killing ground to healing ground, that's what victory looks like. Family members of Marcus's victims came forward to dedicate memorial stones. Patricia Morrison, Jennifer's mother, now in her 70s, spoke through tears. My daughter Jennifer was Marcus Sullivan's first victim. For 15 years, I didn't know what happened to her. Rachel's courage in escaping this island and documenting what she found gave me answers. Jennifer's memorial stone stands here not as a reminder of death, but as a celebration of her life. Thank you, Rachel, for making sure my daughter is remembered. Each family member spoke, honoring their loved one, thanking Rachel, and acknowledging the transformation of the space. Then Zoe spoke. I was 11 when my biological father abandoned us on this island. I didn't understand then what he'd done or what he was. Growing up with that knowledge, being the child of a serial killer, is complicated and painful. But my mother taught me that we're not defined by what was done to us. We're defined by what we build afterward. This memorial center is proof of that principle. My father tried to build a monument to his ego through murder. My mother built an actual monument to survival and hope. I work with families affected by violence every day now. And I tell them what my mother taught me: trauma doesn't have to be your identity. You can transform it into purpose. This island is living proof of that truth. Ethan added, I study serial killers now. I want to understand how they think, how they operate, how they can be caught earlier. Part of that interest comes from wanting to understand my biological father. But mostly it comes from wanting to prevent what he did. Marcus Sullivan operated undetected for 15 years because we don't talk about how predators hide among us. This education center will change that. It will train professionals to recognize warning signs. It will teach survivors to trust their instincts. It will prevent future victims. My father's greatest fear was being caught and exposed. This center ensures he'll be remembered forever, not as the clever killer he thought he was, but as a monster whose crimes created something that helps people. That's the ultimate defeat for someone who craved control and secrecy. After the ceremony, Rachel walked through the memorial garden alone. 8 stones, each engraved with a victim's name and dates. Each surrounded by flowers and memories left by loved ones. Jennifer Morrison, 1975 to 2009, Amanda Chen, 1978 to 2011, Sarah Hughes, 1981 to 2013, Melissa Torres, 1985 to 2015, Christina Valdez, 1987 to 2017, Nicole Henderson, 1990 to 2018, Brittany Shaw, 1992 to 2019, Tanya Williams. 1988 to 2020. Rachel touched each stone, silently acknowledging the women whose deaths had been hidden on this island, whose families had suffered not knowing, whose lives had been stolen by the man she'd once loved and trusted. "I'm sorry I didn't know," Rachel whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't stop him. But I promise you, this place will honor you. Will help others. Your deaths weren't meaningless. They exposed a monster and created this center. That's not enough, but it's something." Patricia Morrison joined Rachel in the garden. "I come here often now," Patricia said. "It helps to have a place to visit Jennifer. A place to feel connected to her. I'm glad. That's what this place should be, connection, not just grief." "Rachel, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever forgive him? Marcus?" Rachel thought carefully. "No. Forgiveness would imply what he did was forgivable. It's not. But I've let go of the anger. Not for his benefit but for mine. Carrying rage would poison me, not him. He's in prison. His life is over. I'm out here, helping people, raising my children, building something meaningful. That's my revenge, living well while he rots in a cell. That's healthy. I wish I could get there. You lost your daughter. That's different from what I lost. I lost a husband who turned out to be a monster. You lost a child you loved. Your grief is deeper. Don't compare your process to mine." They stood together in the memorial garden, two women bound by Marcus Sullivan's violence but no longer defined by it. 20 years after the island incident, Trust Your Instincts had become a national organization with chapters in 35 states. The Survivors Memorial and Education Center had served over 10,000 visitors in its 5 years of operation. The programs offered there, trauma therapy, professional training, survivor support groups, public education, were nationally recognized as best practices. Rachel, now 56, had stepped back from day-to-day operations of the organization she'd founded. She served as Executive Director Emeritus, focusing on strategic vision while younger leaders handled daily management. Zoe had become one of the country's leading experts on children of violent criminals. She'd written a book about her experience and the psychological challenges facing kids who discover their parents committed terrible crimes. She appeared on panels, gave talks, and helped other families navigate similar trauma. Ethan had completed his PhD in forensic psychology and was working with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, specializing in detecting serial predators hiding in domestic contexts, using insight from his family experience to catch killers before they could amass large body counts. Both of Marcus's children had transformed their connection to him into professional expertise that saved lives. Marcus himself, now 73 and having served 20 years of his multiple life sentences, had become irrelevant. He was just one of many aging serial killers sitting in prison, forgotten except as a case study in textbooks and true crime documentaries. He'd never expressed genuine remorse. In occasional prison interviews, he spoke with clinical detachment about his crimes, analyzing them like an interesting academic problem rather than acknowledging the human cost. "I was good at compartmentalizing," Marcus told one interviewer. "Most people can't fully separate different aspects of their lives. I could. That's what made me successful for so long." "Do you feel remorse for the women you killed?" "I understand intellectually that I should. But I don't feel it. That emotional capacity isn't there. Never was." "What about your children? Do you think about them?" "Sometimes. Curious how they turned out. But they're strangers now. My genetic contribution was minimal. Rachel raised them. They're her children, not mine." The interview was disturbing in its emotional flatness. Marcus displayed the same fundamental lack of empathy that had always defined him. Rachel watched the interview when it aired and felt nothing. Marcus wasn't her problem anymore. Hadn't been for 2 decades. On the 25th anniversary of her escape from the island, Rachel returned to the Survivors Memorial and Education Center one more time. She was 61 now. Her hair was gray. She moved a bit slower. But her mind was sharp and her sense of purpose remained strong. The center had continued to grow and evolve. New programs had been added. The memorial garden had expanded to include stones for other victims of serial violence. Not just Marcus's victims, but all those whose families wanted a place to remember and honor. Rachel walked through the preserved hut where she'd found the evidence that exposed Marcus. It was maintained exactly as she'd found it: wallet, bones, personal items, the metal box with documentation. New visitors, hearing the audio tour narrated by Rachel herself, learned the story. "This is where I found the first wallet, belonging to Jennifer Morrison. That discovery changed everything. It made me realize we weren't on a vacation, we were on a killing ground. And it gave me the evidence I needed to expose what Marcus had done." Groups of professionals training at the center used the hut as a case study in evidence recognition, in trusting instincts, in understanding how serial predators operate. Survivors visiting the retreat found the hut both horrifying and empowering, proof that even from the worst circumstances, survival and justice were possible. Rachel sat on a bench overlooking the water where she'd paddled away from the island 25 years ago with Zoe and Ethan in that barely functional kayak. Zoe, now 41, and Ethan, now 38, joined her. "I can't believe it's been 25 years, Zoe said. "I still remember being terrified, not understanding what was happening, just knowing Mom said we had to leave." "I remember thinking we were going to drown," Ethan added. "That kayak felt so unstable." "It was unstable," Rachel said. "But it was our only option. Stay on the island and definitely die, or risk the water and possibly die. I chose possible over certain." "That's always been your philosophy," Zoe observed. "Choose the possibility of survival over the certainty of defeat." "You taught us that." "I learned it here," Rachel said. "On this island. When I found that evidence and realized what Marcus was, I had a choice. Give up in despair, or document everything and fight for our survival. I chose to fight. And that choice led to everything else: exposing Marcus, saving future victims, building Trust Your Instincts, creating this memorial center." "Marcus tried to make this island his monument," Ethan said. "A place where he demonstrated power over life and death. But you turned it into an actual monument, one that helps people instead of hurting them." "We turned it into that," Rachel corrected. "All of us. The victims' families who supported this project. The donors who funded it. The professionals who work here. The survivors who come here to heal. This isn't my monument, it's everyone's who chose healing over horror." They sat together watching the sunset over the San Juan Islands, this family that Marcus had tried to destroy but had instead forged stronger through their shared trauma and recovery. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we died on this island like Marcus planned?" Zoe asked.